Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast, brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. Back-to-back games for the Blackhawks following the Christmas break, and we'll get to the highs and lows of that. But let's start with what we saw Monday on the Fifth Third Arena practice sheet. That was one number 98, Connor Bedard, out skating and not shooting before the Blackhawks took practice. Of course, he did not participate in that.
Yeah, it was great to see. The Blackhawks had an 11:30 scheduled practice on Monday, and I got there around 11 o'clock, and the Hawks have two rinks. And the main one, I saw like two people sitting in the stands. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I walk up the stairs, I put my stuff down in the media room, and I take a look at the second rink, and there is a herd of Blackhawks fans watching practice, and I hadn't walked through yet, but I'm like, that's one of two signs. Either Connor Bedard's on the ice or Frank Nazar's on the ice. And sure enough, it was number 98. And it's a great sign. I was watching it closely, and he did not shoot a single puck, which felt very team mandated, like a strict order not to do so. Kind of similar to when he was going through his jaw injury as a rookie. He was out on the ice, but the team didn't want him to shoot pucks because they didn't want him to clench down on his jaw and kind of use that force. But I thought it was a great sign because the first update that we got from Blackhawks head coach Jeff Blashill after the injury happened was that he was going to be reevaluated after the new year. And so for Connor Bedard to kind of be on the ice a couple days earlier than that, I don't know if it's a coincidence that Team Canada is naming their roster in a couple days, but so maybe he's kind of like, hey, remember me? I'm gearing up towards returning soon. But I thought it was just a great sign, even though he is still probably a couple weeks away from even returning to game action.
Yeah, I think mid-January, January 16, 17, 18, 19 would be the window that I would look at possibly Bedard returning to the ice. But again, we will see. It's a fluid situation, and hopefully the updates will become more rapid and a little more elaborate as we get into the new year. The other update, Frank Nazar was, Jeff Blashill was asked, anything really to add there. And he said it looked like he started on solid food, had some salmon last night. So, if we're inferring that he has a broken jaw, that's certainly a good sign that he's moved off of the strict fluid diet into being able to chew or eat some soft foods like salmon and just trying to keep that weight on, which is a difficult task when you're someone his age and you're on a liquid diet.
Yeah, I remember when Jared Tenorti was here with the Blackhawks, he had said that he lost like 25 pounds of his playing weight being on the liquid diet. Charlie McAvoy recently said that he lost 20 pounds after going through the broken jaw. And so I imagine Frank Nazar is kind of on a similar timeline. And it's kind of funny because Bedard and Nazar are both out of the lineup for two drastically different injuries. And it kind of feels like they could be lining up to return around the same time frame, which would be a huge boost, obviously, for the Blackhawks, because it's been a real struggle for Chicago over the last couple weeks without their two star players.
All right, let's get into the weekend festivities. Back-to-back games, Saturday in Dallas, Sunday evening at the United Center against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Saturday was an interesting day because usually NHL teams arrive in the city that they're going to play in the night before the game, day before the game, and have a morning skate and then take part in the game at night. Because it is the Christmas break in the NHL, the NHL has everybody travel day of that plays on that first day back, which is 2 days after Christmas. And they try to keep it somewhat close in proximity. The Blackhawks had the second longest flight to take to get to Dallas. And they left here Saturday morning, bright and early, did not participate at American Airlines Arena in a pregame morning skate or even a late morning skate. And they took on one of the best teams in the National Hockey League and beat them in a shootout. And I thought it was a fantastic job by Arvid Soderblom in net, which we'll get into that as well, the flipping of Soderblom and Knight in the 1-2 back-to-back combo. But it was one of their more improbable, impressive wins of the season. And when you put everything into it, including Mikheyev being out because of the birth of his new child, it looked like everything was stacked against him and that it was going to be just too steep a hill to climb.
100%. That was maybe the most unexpected win of the season for the Blackhawks because, like you mentioned, 3-day holiday break. Hawks hadn't been on the ice since Tuesday night. Dallas is at home, so they were able to get a full skate in. Jeff Blashill said when he was with Detroit that he did it a couple ways. They skated in Detroit before traveling, or they woke up early, traveled to the destination, skated there, and he's like, I'm trying something different. We're just going to have no morning skate. Everyone gets their rest. They fly to the city. The Blackhawks aren't going to skate, and they didn't. And so the first time they were on the ice was pregame warmups. No Ilya Mikheyev. Dallas Stars starting Jake Ottinger, who is top 3 goaltender in the world. Blackhawks going with their backup goaltender, Arvid Soderblom, who in his previous 5 starts had almost a 6.0 goals against average, mid-80s save percentage. And going up against the number 1 ranked power play in the NHL, Hawks go 4 for 4 on the penalty kill without their top penalty killer in Ilya Mikheyev. And so I did not expect that coming, and that was a really gutsy win by the Blackhawks, and I think it helps set the tone maybe for this stretch that they're going to go on with the 21 games and 40-day stretch. Unfortunately, obviously, they couldn't translate it into the Pittsburgh game, but I thought that was a real well-rounded victory for the Blackhawks that need games like that to kind of tread water without Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar. And so every once in a while, when you get those wins, I think it could be a galvanizing moment.
Yeah, I thought a couple things. I thought the Arvid Soderblom starting him first was really interesting. And we talked about it on this podcast a week or two ago, how strong Spencer Knight's record was following losses. And if you're thinking you're taking on the second best team in the West, one of the best goalies in the world, and you're looking at the 2 games, you're probably saying, look, best case scenario is a split, and our best chances of getting that split are probably at home Sunday night against Pittsburgh. Usually you start your 1A goalie against a more difficult opponent. I think we'd all agree Dallas is a better team than Pittsburgh. But they had done that in the previous 4 occasions, and they had gone with the Knight Soderblom combo on back-to-back nights, and it didn't work. And for whatever reason that is, maybe it was sort of like Blash said about changing up the pre-game routine as far as morning skate at home, flying, or doing it flying and then having a morning skate, and then just saying, you know what, we're gonna cancel that whole thing and try it a different way. Maybe that was the thought process, so to speak, for this. But I thought it was good for Arvid because he'd had such a rough stretch. I think a 5-game personal losing skid, and as you said, the goals against were astronomical. Again, not probably as bad as the numbers indicate. I think some of that was he was the byproduct of some really poor play on the second day of back-to-backs. But if there was such thing as a goalie win this year, I really think Soderblom turned in that performance in Dallas.
Yeah, like that Anaheim game that he was a part of where he gave up 7 goals. He faced like 52 shots, and he actually had a positive goal saved above expected. Like that's how much it tells you how poor Chicago played in front of him. So he certainly isn't largely responsible for some of those losses in the second of back-to-back games. But I did think it was interesting that they started Soderblom in the first game because this wasn't really a traditional back-to-back. It was kind of like pick your poison. Like either Arvid is going to be starting the second of a back-to-back, or Knight gets the first game, but he's coming off a 3-day break where there's no morning skate. So both goaltenders were going to be cold either way. But I did think it was maybe it was partly the Hawks knowing that the cards are stacked against us, against the Dallas Stars. So maybe they wanted Spencer Knight against Pittsburgh that would increase their chances of at least getting some points over the weekend, which oddly enough, kind of Hawks picking up the win against Dallas and then, the Hawks losing against Pittsburgh and Spencer Knight getting pulled in that game. But I thought it was a huge confidence boost for Arvid Soderblom to perform the way that he did against the Dallas Stars. And hopefully for him, that could for him, it's been hard because the last 5 starts, like I don't know when the last time he won a game prior to Dallas. Like he goes a couple games, he goes like a week or two without starting. So it's probably been hard for him to sit on those losses because it's not just, Spencer Knight has now lost 5 starts in a row, but for him, he's playing every night. So he's able to get back at it. When Arvid is coming off a loss, he kind of has to stew on that for a while. And then when he compounds that with another loss, I imagine mentally that's got to be challenging for him. And so for him to be one of the big reasons why the Hawks won in Dallas, hopefully that kind of drops his shoulders a little bit with that he can sit on it for a while.
And they did it beyond regulation. I was texting you right before they went to overtime, like what was the record? And it was 1-6 beyond regulation, 0-2 in a shootout. So it goes to a shootout. We know this team hasn't had a lot of success there. Arvid said he worked a lot on stopping breakaways, and we saw that actually in the game. Jamie Benn had a breakaway opportunity, and he turned that aside. He was really strong in OT and in the shootout. And then the Blackhawks call on Nick Lardis in game 5 or 6 as the 4th shooter to close it out. And shooter's going to shoot. We said he's a goal scorer, and he indeed handled that one and beat Ottinger for the game winner to seal it.
Yeah, and also the Arvid Soderblom, the breakaway, the very next day against Pittsburgh, he stopped Sidney Crosby on that partial breakaway. So it's kind of like, it's a cool moment for him that he was able to have some success. But credit to Blackhawks head coach Jeff Blashill for recognizing that situation where it was a situation where you throw out Nick Lardis to be the 4th shooter, but it wasn't a do or die situation. It was, hey, this is a game-winning moment. And if he scores here, what that could do for his confidence, because he got dropped to the 4th line in the game in Dallas, which, by the way, was maybe the best line that the Blackhawks had going with him, Toninato, and Lafferty. But that's obviously not a role that Lardis is used to playing or you want him to play. And I think Blashill wanted to see a little bit more from Nick Lardis away from the puck. And so for him to perform the way that he did in the 4th line that game, but then also recognizing the situation of, hey, let's just give him this opportunity because he scores. Maybe that frees him up a little bit because the Hawks are going to need guys like him to step up offensively until they get Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar back. And so I thought it was a perfect situation, and then for him to score kind of put a bow on it. And I actually thought that maybe carried into the Pittsburgh game for Lardis specifically.
All right, well, let's get to that Pittsburgh game. So Sunday evening, the Blackhawks host the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they, because the schedule makers had it this way, did not play on Saturday. I think there were 13 games on Saturday. They were in Chicago. They were able to get rest. They were able to have a morning skate. So you were wondering how that first period was going to go, and it went sideways in a hurry as the Pittsburgh Penguins scored the most goals the Hawks have allowed in a first frame this year, 4 goals. And Spencer Knight was in net. This is now a pretty solid sample size. This is the 4th set of back-to-back games. And in game 2, they've lost them all, obviously. And the scores have been 9-3, 7-1, 4-0, and then 7-3 Sunday night to Pittsburgh. So that they've been outscored 27-7 in game 2 of back-to-backs. This is a thing, Charlie, and it's something that they're trying to find some answers to. I thought it was interesting. Blashill said unlike maybe the Anaheim and the Buffalo games where they were just blown out by effort and energy right out of the gates, he looked at this one as they had their scoring chances. They didn't bury them. And on the other end, when Pittsburgh got their scoring opportunities, they capitalized.
Yeah, even the first minute and a half of the game, I think that the first shift, Nick Foligno had a shot on goal, like right out of the gate. And then Tyler Bertuzzi sets up Andre Burakovsky, I think, on the second shift. So the Hawks had an early chance. I think what Blashill might be referring to, without wanting to throw the goaltenders under the bus, obviously, is that the first goal just can't go in from Anthony Mantha. It's a tough one for Spencer Knight. And then obviously he had the softie on the fourth goal as well. And so you look at those things, and there weren't really many structural breakdowns that were like teaching moments for the Blackhawks. It was just the Penguins got saves from their goaltenders and the Blackhawks did not. And so I did think it was two things I kind of circled as like turning point moments for the Hawks. So after the Hawks fell behind 3-0 to Pittsburgh, Jeff Blashill calls a timeout. And he was pretty red in the face when he was addressing his team. Like, he was not happy with the way that his team had started. Well, right after that timeout, about a minute and a half later, the Hawks get a power play opportunity, and they generated just one shot attempt on the power play. Literally seconds after the power play ends, Pittsburgh scores. It was Brian Rust. It was another softie goal. And so the Hawks then, at that moment, pull Spencer Knight. And rightfully so. Like, that was a moment where he played the timeout card, didn't work. Then he plays the pull goaltender card. And I think this was a pulling goaltender card because Spencer Knight had a rare off night. This wasn't I need to address, I need to wake up my team. And so he pulls those two. So I thought Hawks had an opportunity. After the timeout, Hawks go on the power play. If they capitalize there, it's a 3-1 game, and maybe it's a little bit different, because I mentioned on the post-game show, Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, they were up 5-1 on the San Jose Sharks, and they blew a 5-1 lead in the third period, lost 6-5 in overtime. The very next day, the very next game, Pittsburgh played a game against Utah where they were up 3-0 and 4-1. They blow that and also lose that game. So if the Hawks end up going down 3-0, they capitalize on that power play to make it 3-1. Maybe Pittsburgh is thinking, oh no, here we go again. And the Hawks, they play a little bit on their heels. Hawks start to play more on their toes. But that didn't happen. Pittsburgh gets the fourth one. And then I thought the Hawks generated some momentum in the second period. They make it 4-1 on the power play goal, or on the goal by Nick Foligno. And just a brutal too many men on the ice penalty at an ill-advised time. Pittsburgh capitalizes, and it felt like the game was over right there.
Yeah,
and that's just unfortunate.
I thought that's exactly where my turning point was, or my potential momentum changer. Foligno scores a pretty sweet goal, nutmegs himself, and gets them on the board midway through that second period. And you're like, all right, it's 4-1. As you said, like, Pittsburgh has struggled quite a bit recently. You've got a full building because it's the holidays, and they're just dying to get into this game. In fact, Foligno scored right as the Bears scored on a pick six to start their game in San Francisco. And so I think there was some dual action, some second screens going on at the United Center as people were multitasking. But look, the Chicago sports fan is jacked up right now about their Bears, and I think about their Blackhawks, and potentially where they're going to be down the road. And they're waiting to get back into this game. And then that too many men on the ice. And again, it was like a couple of guys that were on the ice. It wasn't even like close. It's a brain lapse. And they scored shortly thereafter. Brazeau scored on the power play goal to make it 5-1. And then he got his hat trick about a minute later. So the game was done. Blashill was asked on Monday, hey, okay, is this, since, over half their roster is 24 and under, are we looking at a byproduct of young players hitting a wall, not experiencing the rigors of an NHL schedule? And when you play those back-to-back games and you're looking for, being honest, your B game, and trying to hang into games. That's a learning curve that they just have not figured out as of yet. And he kind of hemmed and hawed around it a little bit, certainly said that, life in the AHL and NCAA and minor league hockey is nothing like what it is in the NHL. And there certainly is a process that a player needs to go through to get themselves ready to go. And I think we're actually seeing that with Bedard in year 3. But he basically said he'd like to see this team get better defensively, so they don't have to dig out of such a steep hole. If they're better defensively, and even on that first goal, like it was a brutal goal to give up, but it looked like defensively they were in position to make plays, and there just was everybody was a beat or 2 beats slow to stick check or block a shot.
Yeah, I appreciated what Jeff Blashill said after the game on Sunday, just saying, I believe in this team, I believe in this squad, kind of pumping them up, being reaffirming in a positive way. Because quite honestly, Pat, it's really hard for me to get worked up over these losses the last couple weeks because their 2 best players, best skaters, Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar, aren't in the lineup. And it's easy to say, well, without those guys, Hawks have to really buckle down defensively. But when you're not generating much offensively and you're spending most of the time in the defensive zone, I mean, it's just, you can bend and bend and bend, but eventually you're going to break if you're spending too much time in your own zone. And so it's almost like, while Bedard and Nazar, you don't think of them. Nazar obviously plays penalty kill, and he's a dependable player in that aspect. But Bedard and Nazar are also significant pieces to the Blackhawks in generating offense and spending time in the offensive zone. And so when you take those guys away, the defense is going to feel it because they're now playing more. They're spending more time in their own end. And so, I was kind of like, I think it was a couple pre-games ago, I went through some of the notable injuries around the NHL and the impacts that they have felt. Like even Pittsburgh, like the Penguins got off to a terrific start the first 2 months of the season. Malkin goes down. He's been gone for several weeks. And the Penguins, prior to last night's win in Chicago, they had 1 win in their last 10 games. Or the Utah Mammoth, they haven't had Logan Cooley in their last 10 games. And they've been a sub 500 team without him. New Jersey, Jack Hughes has that cut injury. He's gone. They're a different team without him. Like
look at Florida without Kachuk and Barkov.
Yeah, exactly. And I was even trying to go on like a lesser scale, because obviously you take away McKinnon and Makar from Colorado, they're going to be a different team. You take away McDavid, Draisaitl, clear, like those guys are upper echelon. But even in the mid-tier guys, and I think of a guy like I wrote down earlier today was Josh Norris in Buffalo. Like he's missed a majority of the season with the Sabres. He's a top 6 center. And since he's been in the lineup, like the Sabres have won 8 in a row. So it's like you take out an important piece of your roster. And for Chicago, it's 2 key pieces of the roster. You're going to feel the impact of it. Like we'll get to the lines of practice later on, but like Ryan Green is Chicago's first line center right now. You have Oliver Moore and Nick Lardis playing in the top 6. All 3 of those guys were supposed to be in Rockford this year. And so there's just so many players that are playing higher in the lineup or maybe out of position or whatever the case may be. And so it's hard for me to get worked up about some of the losses lately because I just chalk it up to, well, the Hawks don't have 2 of their best players.
Yeah. And again, I want to go back to what you said about how Blashill is handling this. I just find him really measured. I said it on the postgame show on Sunday night. Right guy, right job at the right time. It just seems like, not all losses are the same, right? You can differentiate between not showing up in Buffalo and an effort against Pittsburgh where you hit 3 posts and you outchanced them. Scoring chances by natural stat trick had the Hawks with 30 scoring chances to 17 for Pittsburgh. I don't know, maybe you could find a slightly different total elsewhere, but that's almost 2-1 in scoring chances. And that's something that the Hawks look at when they're trying to assess in totality a game. High danger, the Hawks had the slight advantage 13-9 over Pittsburgh. So those numbers tell you they did get some good looks. We talked about hitting the post 3 times. I like the way he has built this connection with his team, and that, like he said, he likes coming to work. And I sense that they like coming to work, even when they're mired in a 6-game losing skid. I think people can pull back every once in a while and look at this team from 30,000 feet and, connect the dots and see Bedard out and Nazar out and see the goaltending has been down a couple of rungs as we predicted it would be. It couldn't stay at the level it was the first 4 weeks of the season. Look at the power play, 1 for 18 in the 7 games without Bedard. You're not going to win many games when you're going 1 for 18. PK's been okay. But all in all, a lot of firepower, a lot of young guys you're asking to step up. We've even seen throughout this season, Bertuzzi out, Dickinson out, Foligno out, Mikheyev out for, personal it's just, this team is not deep enough to withstand big subtractions. And then when you look out, not only at what's going on here, but what's going on with the organization and their prospects elsewhere, that gets me jacked up. And we're going to get into the World Junior. This is, while they're hovering around the basement, and it looks like it's going to be another, in likelihood, top 5, top 3 pick in the draft. This doesn't feel like the last 2 years, Charlie.
Yeah, you just nailed it spot on. And that's actually why I didn't reference Florida as an example, because it's like you take away Tkachuk, you take away Barkov, and it's like, oh, well, they got Brad Marchand and Sam Reinhart and Carter Verhaeghe. And it's like all these players that can slide into higher roles for the time being, and they kind of won't skip as huge of a beat in the short term. And even the Tampa Bay Lightning, earlier this year, they got off to a pretty rough start when they were healthy. Then they started to lose a bunch of bodies, like Victor Hedman, and Braden Point was hurt, and Nikita Kucherov has missed a couple games. And there were moments this year that I watched Tampa Bay Lightning games, and I'm like, I don't know half of their defensemen's names. I've never seen these guys. And they didn't skip a beat. They were rattling off wins in a row, and it's because they have that culture built in. The Hawks don't have that yet. They're trying to build that. And so when you take away guys like Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar, they just do not have the depth to withstand some of those injuries. And so you have to try to just tread water for the foreseeable future. And the Hawks are having a hard time. And I think that's why Blashill is, I don't want to say taking it easy, but he's not going at the guys as hard, because he realizes this is a hard ask for any team to go through this. And so you mentioned his measured approach. I just think he's striking all the right tones. And I liked what he said after practice today on why he kind of gave I don't even know if it was a post-game locker room speech or just kind of a traditional, hey, I believe in you guys. But he was asked today about that after practice, why did he feel that was the right moment? And after kind of a long answer, at the end of it, he says, I love this group because there are more guys that have pointing thumbs than pointing fingers. A lot of guys that are pointing at themselves, looking in the mirror, and not pointing, well, he wasn't there. You know what I mean? And so it's a very selfless group that understands they're missing 2 key pieces. And so, yeah.
And to that point, Colton Dock was asked today about, is it the youth factor that is leading to the struggles in game 2 of back-to-backs? And Colton's answer was, the young guys, we should be the ones that are propping up the rest of the room. We've played weekend games in juniors and in the minors where we play Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we're 24 and we're 22 and we should have the legs. And while Blashill liked, that kind of selfless response, he also knows playing 3 games at Red Deer is not the same as playing 3 games in 4 nights in the National Hockey League. So it all kind of came together. The selflessness of the team, as you said, but the reality of what they are and where they are in their hockey journey.
Right. It was a very mature response, like a veteran type response for Colton to say, we should actually have the fresher legs and not be leaning more on the veterans to kind of carry us through those second of back-to-backs. But it is a learning lesson because it is different when, especially the Dallas Pittsburgh, it was flying the day of, no morning skate. Then they're getting to Chicago late at 2 a.m. And then so there is that challenge that's like, oh, we didn't have to deal with this in the minors. So physically and mentally, it's a challenge, but it's not. It's guys taking that responsibility upon themselves and not pushing it onto others.
All right, so let's get into some of the lines that we saw Monday at practice and we'll likely see against the New York Islanders on Tuesday night. As you mentioned, Ryan Green is now your one center on the top line. He was in college, obviously, a year ago. He'll remain with Bertuzzi and Burakovsky. It's Teuvo, Oliver Moore, and Nick Lardis as your second line. Moore has been primarily a winger since he's been with the Hawks. He's going to get an opportunity in a center role that he played not only in college, played some in the AHL as well. And Nick Lardis is going to get an opportunity, and both of them to work with a really experienced veteran who has skins on the wall in Teuvo Teravainen, and who can put pucks in good areas for talented players like Nick Lardis.
Yeah, this line jumps out at me as a big fan, and I've been kind of banging on this drum for a while now that I'd like to see Teravainen and Lardis play on the same line because I just think they're going to complement each other very well. Teravainen, playmaker, pass first mentality, Nick Lardis, shooter, but then you also have Teravainen, who has played center in the past. I know he's playing on the wing, but he has a center type mentality that if he finds himself down low and he needs to assist with Oliver Moore in some defensive responsibilities, Teravainen can step in no problem. And my one little issue with the Moore, Green, and Lardis line was that it was just such a young line that you have all three players trying to figure the NHL out together. And it's almost like it felt like there was a veteran that was needed with one of them. Now, Ryan Green obviously has been just absolutely terrific so far this season, and he's handled that responsibility very well. I like the idea of keeping Moore and Lardis together because they do have that built-in chemistry from their time in Rockford. And I don't read too much into Moore playing center because I think Teravainen could take a lot of those draws as well, but also Moore, where I think he could thrive at the center position in this instance specifically, is that he has such incredible speed that playing as a center, if he's down low, if he's the down low guy in the defensive zone, like when he gets the puck, the more space that he has to get his gears going to the highest level, I think that could back off some of the defensemen for the opposition. And so now he's entering the zone with some speed. And then Lardis and Teravainen can kind of work their magic in the offensive zone. And Moore is just kind of a jelly bean that can go anywhere because he's so fast. And so this is the line that really jumps out at me. And I'll be the first to eat crow if this doesn't work. But I would be surprised if this did not work. Like I just think there's a lot of ingredients there between Teravainen and Lardis specifically that their skill sets can complement each other.
Well, let's hope so. We'll move on just to finish out the lines. The third line for Monday's practice was Donato, Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev was back after the birth of his first child. The fourth line, Foligno, Doc, and Slaggert. Go to the defensive side of things, and I thought Vlasic and Crevier probably had their best game together in Dallas on Saturday. Vlasic with a couple of assists in that game. Crevier, block shot, breakaway opportunity on the PK. We spoke to Blashill before Sunday's game against Pittsburgh, and he said by far Louis Crevier has been the biggest surprise to him this season. I think Louis Crevier was looked at as, a bona fide depth defenseman for this organization. And I think he's moved up a ring or two on the pecking order of maybe where the expectations could be, where the ceiling, they might have had the ceiling a little lower than it should be.
Yeah, and I think Jeff also said, correct me if I'm wrong, he thinks that Louis Crevier has been their most consistent defenseman this season.
He did say that. Yes.
And I mean, it's hard not to disagree it's hard to disagree with him because I can't remember the last time I left a Blackhawks game this season feeling like Crevier had an off night. Like, you just know that what you're going to get from him. And his growth has been incredible because he's honestly not a guy that I thought was going to be a piece on this Blackhawks roster, because all the defensemen that the Hawks have been assembling, Levshunov, Rinzel, Korchinski, Del Mastro had a great season.
Kaiser's had a breakout year.
Yeah, and so for Crevier to jump the depth chart the way he has with some of the defensemen, I think is a testament to the growth that he has had so far this season. And if you remember too, he started the year as the extra defenseman. Then he was the 7th defenseman when the Hawks started going 11-7. And now he's the top pairing with Alex Vlasic, and he has stayed there for like more than a month now. And so he's just been incredible. And it feels like too, this is not an area that is his strong suit, or we're not going to mistake him for an offensive defenseman, but he's seemingly getting like one shorthanded breakaway chance per game now. And so he's just effortless skater, uses his stick perfectly, uses his body. I think they certainly, one area that I've noticed, he is using his lethal shot a lot more than he has in the past. And I think it's catching goaltenders off guard with how fast it is. And so he's just been a joy to watch this year.
All right, let's get to the World Juniors going on in Minnesota, in both St. Paul, Minneapolis. We are taping this podcast on Monday afternoon. The tournament's going on as we speak. Let's get into the 3 prospects that we're keeping close tabs on because of their ties to the Blackhawks. And let's start with Anton Frondell. 2 goals, 2 assists. Maybe I missed it. Do you have another? Maybe it's 3 goals now.
And, he has 3 goals in the tournament, but I'm closely monitoring because he's on hat-trick watch right now as we record this.
Okay. All right. So his one-timer from the right flank is elite, Charlie. It looks like it's NHL ready right now. And Frank Saravalli, NHL Insider, has been on our pregame show. He was with me yesterday and will be again the next 2 days. Is talk around the tournament. Again, it's early. We're just approaching maybe the midway mark or the first third of the tournament. But Frondell has turned so many heads that many think he's the best player thus far in the tournament.
Yeah, and it's hard to disagree because that opening game, he scored the opening goal of the tournament. It was a 3-2 win for Team Sweden over Slovakia. He had a goal, an assist, and he had 9 shots on goal, but his shot attempts were clearly higher than that because he also hit 2 crossbars in the game. So I don't know how many shot attempts that he finished with. Maybe it was like in the 15 range.
Yeah, because he had like eight shots on goal in that or something like that, right?
Yeah. So he was sensational, and that shot on the power play, I think all 3 of his goals that he scored in the tournament have been off that lethal shot. And so it's hard to not get excited if you're a Blackhawks fan playing, moving the puzzle pieces. Like, how is this power play going to work? Because Connor Bedard likes that right side.
I know. I was thinking the exact same thing.
But Anton Frondell's shot is pretty lethal. So hey, that's what we call good problems to have, right?
Champagne problems.
Yes, and so he's been fun to watch, and I think the nice thing about Frondell's game is that you see the shot and you're like, ooh, nice. He's gonna be a great player, but he's also a really good 2-way forward. And so that he's not just going to be someone you throw out there on the power play. He's going to be someone that you can depend on no matter where he's playing. Center, wing, doesn't really matter for me. I think he's going to be more of a center with Chicago, even though he is playing wing right now. But just his 2-way ability, I think, is also kind of adds to the package that he brings.
All right, let's get to Vaclav. No look, Nestrasil of Czechia. He has scored a no-look goal. He has assisted on a goal with another no-looker. This guy, he's on the left flank. That no-look goal was incredible.
Incredible. I'm having a really hard time finding a potential NHL comparable for Nestrasil, because what guys are is he 6'6", 6'7"? I have no idea, that can do what he does on the ice, but it also isn't, this big bottom six guy that's just going to be, a grinder. Like he has offensive skill set to him. And in his first game, he had 2 assists, a shot on goal. It was a 7-5 loss to Canada. But in the second game, he has a goal, an assist, and he logged north of 20 minutes of ice time in the 7-2 victory over Denmark. So it feels like, man, the cupboard is so full with the Blackhawks. And again, not every one player is going to hit and it's going to translate to the NHL. When you see guys graduate from one level to another and it's like their production stays the same or it gets better, I mean, that's got to be such an encouraging sign when you're monitoring these prospects. And it feels like we're getting it right now from the Chicago guys.
All right, AJ Spellacy, Team USA, started on the 4th line. He was bumped to the 2nd line in USA's second game. Couple of assists, big 6'3", 205 pounds, models his game after Tom Wilson. He's been banged up a little bit in Windsor, a shoulder, and I think that got him off to a bit of a slow start. But by all accounts and what we've seen thus far, man, I really like what I see, because he's a piece that the Blackhawks forward group needs, and he's turning some heads and looks really, really promising.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he suffered that injury in the Tom Curver showcase, the prospect showcase. I remember he left early in that game, but boy, is he fun to watch for different reasons. Like when he is on the ice, he makes the opposition nervous, because his first shift of the USA game, he laid a bulldozer of a hit behind the net, and it's almost like he was making his mark early. Like, this is what you're going to have to deal with all game and all tournament. And that's why he's fun to watch, because he's also not a guy that just goes around hitting people. Like, he's got offensive skill set to his game, and he plays on the penalty kill. So he has really good defensive awareness and that skill set as well. I think he immediately got generated a scoring chance on USA's first penalty kill of the game. And so no surprise, the last time we talked about this, he was a guy that I said, watch out for, because I think he's going to thrive in a tournament like this, because in the regular season in juniors, he's just kind of like ho-hum. I want to get to the meaningful games, because that's where his game comes out. And we're seeing it right now for Team USA.
And if you're watching this on CHSN Tuesday, AJ Spellacy is going to be on the Blackhawks Countdown Live pregame show.
All right.
So, yeah, we're looking forward to that. I think Frank Saravalli is going to handle that interview. So we'll talk to the Blackhawks prospect Spellacy on the pregame show coming up in just a little bit on CHSN. I think that's going to do it for this edition. Anything you got before we exit stage right?
The only thing I was going to say is I believe I saw that Team Canada will be naming their roster for the Olympics on Wednesday, but I think it's going to be in the morning, about 10:30 or 11. I saw that coverage start. Okay. So we'll be on the lookout for that and whether or not Connor Bedard is part of that roster.
We'll see you at the United Center Tuesday night. Blackhawks in action against Matthew Schaefer and the New York Islanders. We'll get our first look at him on the west side. And then Thursday night, New Year's Day night, a game against the Dallas Stars, and they'll have payback on their mind. So hope to see you at the United Center. Thanks for watching and listening to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. We'll catch you next time.